friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I recently got a question about food storage in relations to meal planning. And do I store my foods based on that? Well, no, because I'm not really into meal planning. Now, I used to be years ago, back when my kids were young and before I got serious into food storage. And the reason I did it that way, I planned out my meals, was so that when I made my bi-weekly trips to the store, I knew exactly what I wanted to buy to make those meals for that week. And I also based it on the things that were on sale. But once you get serious into food storage and you have a pantry well stocked, that's not necessary anymore. And though I still try to stock up on things when I see them go on sale, the meals I make no longer have to be tailored to what is on sale at the store for that week, because I really don't go to the store that much. We make a trip into Costco, which is 75 miles from us, about 3 to 4 times a year. So usually every 3 to 4 months, in other words, and then we'll stock up on our basic necessities when we do that. And then there are certain things I order online and stock up through that way, whether it be through Azure Standard or Amazon. Like now I'm getting a lot of my grains from Amazon. There's a lot, it kind of switches back and forth because you can get some good organic non-GMO grains from Amazon for about the same price as what it costs for Azure Standard when you don't have a drop point next to you and you have to pay the high cost in shipping. Some things from Azure Standard are cheaper even when you figure in that shipping cost. Now, if you have an Azure Standard drop point near you, I do recommend them. You are going to get the best deal on grains and other baking supplies that are good high quality, organic, non-GMO. So look into that for yourself. But that's not always the best resource for us for price. It just depends on exactly what it is I'm getting. But that's not what this video is about. So what I did was I pulled out a few things and wrote a few quick notes about just a few of the things I stock up on and why, and how that works into my meals. And one of the reasons why I love food storage now is I don't have to do specific meal planning because I already have all the ingredients I need in my stores. And what those kind of ingredients are going to be are things like home canned tomatoes. This is a staple for me. And I like canning up lots of tomatoes, whether they be ones I can buy from a produce stand or even the kinds I grow, which I do grow my own tomatoes, but some years I don't, like this past year, I don't get a great harvest. So if I can get a good deal on tomatoes, and I don't care how many pounds it is, grab it up, I just process them in the blender and can them. I do add a little salt and a little bit of vinegar to them, but anyway, because like this, they are multi-purpose. So if I feel like today, I feel like making an Italian dish, whether it be my homemade pizza, spaghetti, lasagna, or even raviolis, which I haven't made in a long time, but I need to someday so I can share my ravioli. This is totally from scratch. It's a long process, but that's why I don't do it. I haven't done it in a long time, but they are good when they're homemade. But anyway, the ravioli, I can use these to make ravioli sauce, which basically my Italian sauce is all the same for all of those things. I do some variations, but either way, with keeping the tomatoes plain like this, I can make the variations to fit. I also use tomatoes like these when I'm making homemade chili, and they also get used in making my homemade barbecue sauce. Sometimes I will add them to things like meatloafs and whatnot, but that's only if I've already got a jar opened, because a quart is a lot to add to a meatloaf. So if I already have a jar open and I set some aside from whatever it was I was using the tomatoes for, then that I might add into the meatloaf. So tomatoes are definitely a staple because of the multi-purpose. Now, I do still occasionally can up some Italian sauce, just a little bit of these things. Now I've gotten into canning up some meatballs. I have been canning soup and chili for a long time. Those are set aside for emergency meals. So in other words, something happens, all of a sudden your day is gone. You haven't pulled anything out of the freezer to thaw, or you haven't started cooking, baking, whatever it is that you had planned on making that day, and you realize the day just totally got away from you. Well, I know I can go back there and grab a jar of chili or even a jar of sauce out of the pantry, and if I'm making a spaghetti, it doesn't take long to cook up some spaghetti noodles, and I've got my sauce all ready to go. So tomatoes are one of those things. Another thing I like to do with tomatoes is what I typically do with my homegrown tomatoes is I will blend them up just like I do those. Then I will dehydrate them into almost like a fruit leather, then break them up into flakes. You can also powder them up. I just break them up into flakes because that's easy enough. And then I vacuum seal them into jars. And these are great for adding to the already canned tomatoes to thicken it up. So that way I don't have to cook the sauces down for a couple of days to get the thickness I want, or use a tomato paste to get the thickness I want. I just add the dried tomato flakes, and that thickens it right up. Now let me mention, I don't have anything against putting up one use kind of things, and though chocolate chips can have many uses, really the only thing I ever use them in is for making the cowboy cookies, which I do have a recipe on, by the way. And so yes, I do stock up on chocolate chips and vacuum seal them into jars. These particular ones are from 2014. I opened a jar of these just a couple of months ago and made some more cowboy cookies, and they were great. Let's talk a little bit more about garden related things. So obviously I grow potatoes because potatoes not only grow well here, which potatoes grow well almost anywhere, but they definitely grow well for us. There's very little work involved in growing potatoes. And potatoes are one of those multi-purpose things. As anyone should know, you can do so many things with potatoes. You can have mashed potatoes, fried potatoes. You can bake the potatoes. You can cut them up and add them to soups and stews, or even put them in a pan with some butter and let them bake that way. I call that butter baked potatoes. Sometimes I'll sprinkle a little seasoned salt and throw some onion and garlic in there with them too. And then of course there's different casseroles that you can make with them, like the shepherd's pie or the moussaka, like the recent video I just put out. And some other garden related things, beans. I grow a lot of beans every year, and the beans I tend to grow the most of, because they do best for me, are the runner beans. I've got both scarlet and sunset runner beans plus barnside sweet runner beans. And they're all mixed in here together. And the thing I like about those is they're a dual purpose bean. So I can grow a lot of them. They grow excellent for us. You pick them when they're young, and then you can can them up like you see in these pictures. This is what they look like when you gather them smaller. And then I just cut them and can them. They're so easy to can up. And then I have some canned green beans ready to go, and I keep those simple too. That way, if I want to add a little bit of onions and garlic or something else to it, or I want to keep them plain, or I want to throw them into another dish such as a shepherd's pie or some other kind of casserole, then they're ready to go as they are. Of course, they're great fresh right off the vine. I love them when they're fresh and raw. They're so tasty. And then when I let them finish growing, I've got beans like this, a dry bean that makes that not only is good for seed for the next year, or that I can sell in my store like I'm doing now, then I've got plenty of dry beans that I can use for making chilies. I do still stock up on red beans and pinto beans just to add to what I already have, but with just the two of us now, we could survive off of our own beans just fine. And then of course the other things that grow well in my garden that are one of the most important things in my garden are my herbs. I have herbs of all kinds. Herbs are another one of those things that I grow and then I put up into my food storage by dehydrating and then vacuum sealing into jars. I have jars and jars and jars of dried herbs in my food storage. So depending on the herbs, some of the herbs like rosemary and sage and thyme, these things are used, though they have a lot of great medicinal properties. Oh, and oregano. How could I forget that? They're also things that I use to add flavor to my sauces and more. Though that's the great thing. If you're getting into herbs, I say start with the culinary herbs because they have great medicinal properties as well. And again, let me state this again. Rosemary, oregano, sage, and thyme are 4 of your best culinary herbs that most people can grow pretty easily that also can be used for medicinal purposes. Right here I have mint. Mint is also a staple herb for us, and mint also has multi-purposes that can be used medicinally, because now I've been infusing my oil that I use in my muscle rub. One of the herbs I've been infusing into that are peppermint, as well as the red pepper and the comfrey and the arnica. So peppermint is something else I've been adding to my infused oil that I use in my muscle rub recipe, because mint is a really good one. But my very favorite thing to use the mint for is making my nightly pot of tea. I love a good strong peppermint tea. And that's just peppermint. I have all kinds of mints that I grow, but I'm just giving you an example. So this is something that every year, as soon as it starts coming in the early spring, I start harvesting and drying. It's usually the first thing to go on my dehydrator at that time of year. And I put up as many jars as I can through the year, because we go through a lot of peppermint through the year. And then when it's coming in fresh, I don't make the teas out of the dried stuff, I make it out of the fresh. So just a few examples of things that I grow and put up, and there's many uses there. Now let's talk about, and obviously if you're vegan, you can just tune out a little bit for this one, but let's talk about some home canned meats. I do like to have home canned meats on hand, because it's a way that I can make more room in the freezer, and then the meats are ready to go for many things. I have a video just on the many uses of home canned meats that I will link to down below, so I won't talk about all the many uses here. You can check that video out if you'd like, but when they're like this, they're ready to go. So to me, this is another pantry staple, having meats on hand for the many recipes and ways that they can be used, as well as the fact that if you're in a real bad situation, let's say, though for us power is not really going to be an issue, because we have several forms of power, and plus we have the wood stove to cook with, and we have a rocket stove, and we have a barbecuer. But let's say you're in a situation, you live in an apartment, you're out of power, you don't have any way to cook the foods that you have. Well, home canned meats are something that you can eat right out of the jar, and that goes with any other home canned good. So even if you're vegan, your home canned carrots and green beans, these are things you can eat right out of the jar if you have to, without heating, because they're already cooked, they're ready to go, and they're safe. As long as your seals are good, then they're safe to eat right out of the jar without having to cook them. Now let's move on to talking about grains. Grains are something, my favorite, by the way, whole grain. I do stock up on others, and I've got some barley coming in. I finally remembered, thank you to one of my subscribers who mentioned it. Barley is something I've been meaning to at least have at least a 25-pound bag of, because I love barley added in soups. But you can do that with your other wheat grains. So my favorite grain, as far as multi-purpose grain to stock up on, is hard white wheat. When I've got the whole grains, then I can either use them whole, like I said, in soups. I can give them a good coarse grind for making something like a hot cereal. As you can see in this picture here, I always keep some of that ready on hand. You can blend it with other grains when you're doing that too. I link to that video down below if you're curious on how I make the hot cereal. Then of course you can grind them up fine into a flour, and then they've got many uses. You can make noodles. I have a couple of recipes how to make your own pasta. You can make pie crusts. You can make your own homemade tortillas. Obviously, the grains just have so many purposes. You can make biscuits. You can make quick breads, like an apple or a pumpkin spice or banana bread, or even the pineapple banana coconut bread that I have a recipe on. And then, of course, you got cakes and other pastries, cookies. Or you can use it for thickening sauces or making pie fillings, such as the chocolate pie recipe that I have. Moving on from there, here's another staple I keep on hand. Speaking of chocolate pie, is cacao powder, raw cacao powder. Many uses, and one of those obviously is the chocolate cream pie. I also make my own homemade chocolate syrup. Yes, I have a recipe on that. I also have a whole playlist on various different types of chocolates you can make that, and they're all my own recipes. So the cacao powder, with that you still have to have the cacao butter, which I also stock up on that as well. And you can check those recipes out to see what I use, what I stock up on, a few other things to stock up on. Even though it's pretty easy to make your own pasta noodles, it is time consuming. And pasta, dried pasta, I get the organic Italian pastas from Costco because they have the best price for organic pastas. And I stock up on them, and they will last for years, even in their plastic packages. Yes, I know they're plastic. I don't want to use all of my jars for this when I can stick these in there. It's one less thing I have to worry about breaking in the case of an earthquake. And they don't need to be vacuum sealed into jars because they're going to last for years in their own packaging. Pastas are another staple. Obviously, you've got spaghetti, which is one of my very favorite dinners, is spaghetti. I love spaghetti, but there's also homemade macaroni and cheese. Just a very simple, family-friendly recipe almost everybody likes, where it has, you can have ground beef in it or not. You can keep it vegan. And it's just pasta and rice and then whatever vegetables and flavorings you want to add to it. I'll link to that recipe down below. Now, I'm not new to stocking up on powdered milk, but lately I've been adding more new dairy powders to my food storage, such as the heavy cream and the real butter. And you would have seen the videos I did on this, and I'm still, even since shooting those videos, keep experimenting with these so I can get familiar with using them, and I'm finding them to be a great staple to add more of to my food storage. Now I have lots of powdered milk because I've been stocking up on that for years. But adding the heavy cream and the butter powder just takes it to a whole new level. I can mix them together in various different ways to make all kinds of different sauces and gravies. And of course, there's still the option of having it ready in your fridge. You know, you want to make sure you mix it up good first, then put it in your fridge so it can chill, and then it can be ready to serve over cereal if fresh milk is not available. So we don't have dairy animals. Now, when I first started my channel, we were getting goat milk for a while from a local friend, but she had to get rid of her goats, and so we have not had that anymore. So that's why in a lot of my earlier videos, you will have seen me doing a lot of stuff with goat milk. Well, that is no longer available to us. So now we depend on both the organic milk that we can get from Costco, and we stock up on that in the boxes because they freeze beautifully, or, you know, when we can get into town, or using the boxed milk, Gosner milk, and that can last for years, literally, in your food storage, but I do cycle through it. But your powdered milks are going to last even longer, especially if you repackage them out of these containers. Though I still think if you left them in the plastic containers, I honestly believe as long as you don't open them, they will last for years, even in these. I just would suggest, even if you're going to reseal them into jars, like I've done with some, I still recommend you keep them in a dark place if you're doing that for long-term storage. And yes, I recommend vacuum sealing them. And then one more thing I wanted to mention, and this is going to be especially for those of you who have to be dairy-free, or if you just choose to be vegan, and that is nuts. I recommend stocking up on nuts of all varieties, of all your favorite varieties, because yes, you can do this. And as you can see in these pictures, I vacuum seal the nuts into jars for long-term storage. I have so far not had any problem with that except for one jar of Brazil nuts so far. And I did start freezing my Brazil nuts after that one, but I do just think I might have had a bad batch. So far, none of my other nuts, and you're always going to find at least one nut that's not good, and it doesn't matter what kind of nuts they are. And I do think Brazil nuts are the ones that you're most likely to come across a couple that just aren't very good. But here's the thing about nuts and why I stock up on them. Not only do I just enjoy snacking on nuts just as they are, and I have all kinds. I have walnuts, pistachios, almonds, hazelnuts, Brazil nuts, macadamia nuts. I know I'm forgetting something, cashews, pecans. These are all things I have stored up. And here's just a few of the things that you can do with your nuts. And even whether you're vegan or not, you can make your own nut milks of all varieties. I have a whole playlist just on the dairy-free things that you can make using nuts. And then once you've got your nut milk made, you can make a white sauce from that. And so you can make your own fettuccine sauce. I have a video just on that in that playlist. You can also make your own cheeses. And this is just what you do with the pulp after you've made your milk. So you're getting double duty out of your nuts when you do that. Or you can use those nuts to make a flour out of that you can use for whatever you want, whether it be making crackers or adding to your breads, or even using as a breading on other things instead of using flour. So those of you who are gluten-free, that could be a good option. So nuts are a good thing to stock up on if you're gluten-free as well, because of the many uses. But if you're not gluten-free or dairy-free like we're not, they still have tons of uses for us. So I have a lot of nuts in storage, and of course they can be added to the cranberry sauce or cookies and cakes and whatever just sounds good to you, or even your homemade chocolates, because I sometimes will add almond slices to the homemade chocolate. Okay, so there's just a few of the many examples. I could be here all day talking about the things I stock up on and their multi-purpose and how I do it. But what I would like for you to do is share down below your ideas. What is your favorite thing to stock up on that has multi-uses, multi-purpose in your pantry, so that other people can come in, especially those people that are new that are trying to build up their food storage and they're needing some more good ideas of things to put up for the future of themselves and their families. Okay, well, I hope you all got some good information out of this. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.